What's up everybody, and welcome to another Pokemon Theory, where I like to take a look at some of the cool and interesting theories and mysteries that are present in the Pokemon world. The theory I'm covering today asks a very important question: is Ash Ketchum a clone? Before we get started discussing and diving into this topic, a quick note is that I'm going to be doing a couple of things differently in this theory. The first thing I'm doing differently is that I'm actually taking on a fan-requested Pokemon theory. This theory was actually requested by Anime Andrew, and he did a lot of his own research on it as well. I've been doing my own research on it, and this video will mainly be about what I've found and theorized on. But Anime Andrew, if you're watching this, then you should post your theory in the comments section so that everyone can see your own take on it. Usually when I make and cover Pokemon theories, I try to do videos on well-known and oftentimes well-accepted theories, such as Professor Oak being a league champion, or the legendary beasts being, at one point in time, Eevees or Eeveelutions. The difference with this video and theory is that it's really unbelievable. Just from the title alone, you should get a feel that this theory is going to be really far-fetched. So please, take all of this theory with a grain of salt. I'm not saying it's even remotely true by any means, but it is an interesting and fun theory to take a look at and analyze, which is why I decided to cover it this week. Alrighty, let's get started. One thing we need to note right at the start of this theory is that the anime and games are in completely separate universes and have their own stories and rules regarding Pokemon and how they work and function. There are a lot of things that are similar between them, but there are a couple of things that are different between the two mediums. Because there are these slight differences, and considering that Ash being a clone is an anime-centric theory, I'm mainly going to be using facts and evidence found in the anime episodes and Pokemon movies. That being said, there will still be some information and evidence pulled from the games, but not a whole lot. Most of this will be coming from Pokemon's first episode of the anime and the first Pokemon movie. There are a couple of different variations to this whole Ash is a clone theory. I'm going to be going over one of the main ones, then a slight variation to it. There's so many different variations and ideas about this theory that I'm just going to try and summarize most of them, or else this theory would be well over an hour in length. One thing that's worth noting about the anime is that cloning is definitely possible. We don't need to look any further than Mewtwo and his clone army, who are a living testament that cloning works in the Pokemon anime. They've shown that Pokemon can be cloned, but is it possible that a human could be cloned in the Pokemon anime? Surprisingly, it seems like human cloning could definitely be a possibility in the Pokemon anime. The uncut story of Mewtwo's origin, which is a small anime special that explains Mewtwo's origin before the events of Pokemon the first movie, gives us some insight into human cloning within the anime. Dr. Fuji, who was the scientist behind cloning Mewtwo in the anime, was also trying to make a clone of his daughter Amber, who had died while she was young. Throughout the special, we see Mewtwo communicating telepathically with Amber 2, who is the clone of the original Amber. An interesting thing that's shown about human cloning in Amber 2 is that the original Amber's consciousness is still intact inside Amber 2. Throughout the special, she's shown to recognize who she is and what certain things are that the original Amber would have seen, such as the sun, moon, and wind. Unfortunately, the cloning process of Amber 2 failed, but this did give us some good insight into how the cloning process in the Pokemon anime works, as well as how it's possible for somebody's consciousness to be either cloned or transplanted after they have died. Now here's where the theories start to kick in. So, for this theory to take off, we have to assume that some other Pokemon theories are true first, mainly the one that claims that Giovanni is Ash's father. I'm not going to talk about the validity of that theory, but for the sake of the Ash being a clone theory, let's assume that Giovanni is indeed Ash's father. Like most of the out there theories, this one starts right at the moment where Ash is electrocuted in the first episode of the anime. Rather than being fine afterwards, or going into a coma of all things, this theory claims that Ash actually died from the electric shock that occurred. Here's where the theory starts to get a little bit crazy and off the wall. Assuming that A, Giovanni is Ash's father, and B, Giovanni is still trying to perfect cloning and is working on making Mewtwo, it wouldn't be impossible for Giovanni to have used Ash as a test subject for cloning. Perhaps Giovanni already had a clone of Ash that he had been working on, and when he found out the real Ash had died, he simply implanted the consciousness of the real Ash into the clone and swapped the clone in. I'm not going to say this is the most realistic or plausible ideas that could have happened, but it's definitely an interesting idea and could explain some of the small quirks and things that happen in the anime. For example, this could possibly explain why Ash is still 10 years old. With cloning being in its infancy in the anime, and with it never having worked on a human before, perhaps one of the side effects of cloning is that the clone is genetically unstable. This would make it so that about a year after the clone is made, it would deteriorate fully. It's possible that before the clone dies, or Ash goes on a journey to a new region, Giovanni secretly replaces the deteriorating clone with a brand new clone that has the old Ash clone's consciousness inside of it. The clone would still have a 1-year life expectancy, thus making it so that every year, a brand new 10-year-old Ash clone would be swapped in. Ash being a clone could also explain why he's been shown to have almost super strength at times, and an extreme tolerance to some Pokemon's attacks, such as Flamethrower or any number of electric attacks. In Pokemon, the first movie, Mewtwo states that his clone Pokemon are far superior in strength. If Mewtwo could make his clone Pokemon this way, then I think it would be possible that Giovanni could have made genetic improvements to the cloned Ash to ensure that he wouldn't get accidentally killed again by electricity or any other Pokemon's attacks. It's also said that Ash being a clone could possibly contribute to Pikachu starting to respect Ash. If Ash really died for Pikachu on that day, then Pikachu would definitely start to respect and look up to Ash and try its hardest to not let any more harm happen to him. This theory also claims that Jesse, James, and Meowth, rather than following Ash just to catch his Pikachu, are following him to keep tabs on the clone for Giovanni. It would explain why they appear in almost every episode of the anime, and why they haven't gotten fired yet for being absolutely terrible at their job. This theory also has another big part to it, but I'm not going to be going over it too heavily, because I feel like it's really contrived and just doesn't fit in that well with the rest of the theory as a whole. The other part to this theory says that the Ash clone has a set of commands ingrained into his subconscious, which tell him to do certain things. Even for a theory, I feel like this is a pretty big stretch, but the basic 4 commands he has are: Number 1. The Ash clone has to return to Pallet Town after a year. I believe the original theory that was made on this said that he was programmed to return to Pallet Town every year to get a new body because his mother couldn't handle the stress and pressure of seeing the Ash clone age because she deep down knew that the real Ash was dead. One of the other theories on this is that the clone's body starts to degrade and fall apart after a year, so Ash has to return to Pallet Town for his consciousness to be implanted into a new body. I like the body degrading theory a little bit better than saying that Ash's mom would become mentally unstable, but that's just my personal taste in these theories. The second subconscious command that the Ash clone supposedly has is that the Ash clone can't retrieve any Pokemon after storing them because they might be able to sense that he is a clone. I'm unsure as to why Ash's own Pokemon couldn't know that he's a clone, but this subconscious command is supposedly trying to explain why he doesn't swap his main party around more in the anime. The third command is that the Ash clone is programmed to never win a league because when he does, he will be swarmed with press, which could eventually lead back to Giovanni and Team Rocket's involvement in creating the clone. And the fourth and final subconscious command that the Ash clone supposedly has is that the Ash clone can't ever get involved romantically with anyone due to the short lifespan and nature of it. Those are all of the subconscious commands that Giovanni would have allegedly implanted into the Ash clone. To me, this is where the theory starts to feel a little bit contrived and unnatural. These subconscious commands are supposed to explain why Ash does what he does, but to me, it just comes off as contrived and almost trying too hard to make the theory fit in with the anime and what Ash does inside of it. I have the same feeling about the coma theory, which is my least favorite Pokemon theory because of how it tries to explain and justify everything in the anime by Ash being in a coma. I'm not going to say that this version of the clone theory is a bad theory, it's just really far-fetched, and with the addition of subconscious programming, it just makes it that much more unbelievable for me. That being said, it's still a pretty interesting and kind of fun theory to think about. Before I end this theory video, I briefly want to go over a second theory about Ash being a clone that is slightly similar, but does have some key differences from the first that I like a little bit better. The second theory about Ash being a clone says that he has always been a clone, even from birth. Rather than being cloned from another Ash, this theory claims that he is a clone of either an anime version of Trainer Red, who we haven't seen at all in the mainline anime, or he is a clone of Richie, who is another young trainer that is very similar to Ash. This theory has many different interpretations on why Giovanni cloned him, but one I've seen thrown out a lot is that Giovanni wanted to make the ultimate Pokemon trainer that would work for him and Team Rocket. This is why Giovanni would have cloned Red, or possibly Richie, who have both shown skills in being Pokemon trainers. Of course, for this theory to work, we have to assume that Red would have some sort of mainline anime version of himself that could be in the same universe as Ash. The Pokemon Origins Red, while technically an anime version, isn't set in the same universe as Ash or Ash's world, so he wouldn't really count. Assuming that Giovanni would still be the maker of the clone, he would have augmented the clone with fire, electric, and other resistances, along with super strength, to make sure that this future trainer would be the strongest. Giovanni would have supposedly added in increased mental functioning as well to ensure that the clone could always win Pokemon battles and be able to use highly advanced strategies. Unfortunately for Giovanni, the final part of this theory says that the clone didn't progress as Giovanni would have wanted it to. It still retained its supernatural strength and resistances, but its mental capacity and thought process wasn't as advanced as it should have been. This would make it so that as Ash developed, he would have these physical enhancements, but his mind would still be average and on par with other kids his age. Now, the only problem with this version of the clone theory is that the timing and ages of all the characters involved just doesn't work out. Ash has been shown to have flashbacks to when he was younger, so if he was indeed cloned, he would have had to have been born as either a baby or a young child, roughly the age of when we see him in Serena's flashback. Because the Ash clone would have to have been born as either an infant or a child, and not born as the 10-year-old, this kind of makes it almost impossible to fit in either Red or Richie as being who he was cloned from. In the case of Richie, assuming that Ash ages normally as a clone, and that Ash and Richie are roughly the same age, with Richie perhaps being maybe slightly older by a year, it just doesn't make any sense. If Giovanni wanted to make the perfect Pokemon battling clone 10 years ago in the form of Ash, then why would he use Richie as a base? 10 years ago, Richie would have been around 1 year old and would have shown no ability in Pokemon battling or anything skillful in nature. It just doesn't make any sense for Richie to be the base for an Ash clone, because Richie would have been so young at the time that there would have been no reason that Giovanni would have used him at all as a clone base. Anyways, those are just a couple of theories on if Ash is a clone. I'm sure I missed some of the other ideas and variations on this, but I tried to keep the theories in this video semi-believable, so I didn't include any of the truly weird and out-of-place ones. Personally, while this is a pretty neat and interesting theory, I'm not sure if it's really that believable. It's really outlandish, and I think we all know that there's no way that the anime writers would have put something like this in the anime intentionally. I feel like the clone theory just slightly matched up with some of the things in the anime, and once it started to get traction, it sort of morphed and shaped itself to explain every little oddity in the anime. This is very similar to the Ash and Akoma theory, where it's kind of a neat idea, but it just tries to go in and explain every little detail and strange thing that happens in the anime. Anyways, if you guys have any theories or mysteries you'd like me to check out, feel free to leave your ideas or your thoughts on if Ash is really a clone in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.